In today's episode, we are merging food science with nutrition. So, in addition to being a registered dietitian, I also have a degree in food science. It's something that helps me practically daily as an added layer to my nutrition background. Food science, whether we think about it or not, really plays a key role in pretty much every single food that ends up on our shelves. It may be as simple as natural ways to increase shelf life of produce or how those nutrition facts labels actually end up on those packages. Our guest today is Dr. Darryl Holliday. He has a PhD in food science, and Darryl is my go to food science expert. He and I have worked together on lots of different projects over the years. He has worked with me to lab test products to see if they're really true to label, is what they say they are, and what the nutrition facts they claim. Is that what's really in there? He's also worked with me to test shelf life for new product development and everything in between. I always find my conversations with Dr. Holliday to be really interesting. I learn something. I think that they're very entertaining, and I hope that you do as well. So, in today's episode, he and I are talking about the real story behind food labels. So, the nutrition labels that you see, how do food makers even figure these out? What numbers are on the label that don't even matter at all? And what food makers are or aren't telling us. Also, Darryl is full of fun facts and interesting stories, from the origin of breakfast cereal, for example, to some really crazy stuff that we had no idea could even happen when we microwave. So he's breaking down the facts and fiction on all of this for us. So welcome, Darryl. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us. And I'm going to ask you to do your own intro so that we can make sure that all is covered, starting with your title and your role in the food science department at Holy Cross here in New Orleans.
Dr. Darryl Holliday with the University of Holy Cross Food Science Program. I'm the program director and chair of the Biological and Physical Sciences Department. I have a PhD in food science, and also am a certified research chef through the Research Chefs Association.
Okay, so we're talking all things food label today, and knowing that our listeners are a savvy bunch. And so we're not going through how to read a food label. That's not what this is about. It's more about that label that you see on the food package. How does it get there? And so, Dr. Holliday, or Darryl, as we say, you're in the food analysis lab, and I turn to you for all types of questions. So whether I'm working on a project and I'm running across a question that I'm not sure of, or I need validation, sometimes I might have a hunch on something, but I kind of need validation. Like, hey, this seems kind of hokey. Does this seem like it's kind of like wacky marketing? And you're like, absolutely it is. So then sometimes we're like, well, let's test it and bust it open. Or others where, we're looking at pH questions or things like that. Then, so give us a little bit of an overview of what you do in your lab, just to kind of give our listeners some insight. And then we'll kind of dive into what you do as far as the labeling goes.
Sure. So in my lab, I run the food processing and analysis lab at the University of Holy Cross. In my lab, we focus on the impact of processing on food safety and on nutrition. And within that, that means we're looking at analyzing the food components, whether it's from a sensory standpoint. And what that means is how consumers taste and evaluate the product when they're eating it. We look at it from an analytical method, breaking it down, looking at its texture, its color, and then, of course, the nutritional side. And so with the nutritional side, we kind of have two aspects that we can do. We can use one of the USDA linked software companies, and that's where we put the recipe into the program. The program generates a nutritional label. The other side of that is we can do what's called a wet chemistry analysis, where we're actually measuring the amount of fat, the crude fat, total carbohydrates, total protein, and ash, which is a combination of most of the minerals. But then we can also look at the vitamin content of specific things. We are very fortunate. We got a grant recently that helped us buy a brand new HPLC. And so we've been doing some ethanol testing for some local kombucha companies. And so really we have the capabilities, whatever the industry is looking for, we have ways of helping them identify on all that.
So the sensory aspects of it, so how someone perceives food, if they perceive it as being salty, sweet, et cetera, you have ways that you're measuring that or testing that. And then the lab where you're looking at carbs, protein, fat, vitamins, minerals. Let's talk for a second about the sensory. So, this is where, like, an example might be a company is trying to dial back the sodium in their product, but they want to work to make sure people don't notice it or that it's not really going to be missed. So, you'll work with them on those types of projects.
Right. So what we do is we basically set a design and we say, okay, what is the estimated amount that they're looking to reduce the sodium content by? And we'll kind of start there and we'll go in stages. And really what we look at is at what point can consumers no longer, or at what point can consumers tell the difference? And then we back off a little bit and then we see if consumers can still tell the difference. If not, then we know that's an acceptable starting point in a way of reducing sodium.
And what are some of the cool projects that you've worked on with that or interesting things?
So we've done some work with rice dishes. We are in the process of publishing a paper with Drexel University, and we worked with them to develop a reduced sodium roll for the Philadelphia school system. And we are pulling out almost 1,000 pounds of sodium per year out of the Philadelphia school system with just the bread alone
That's from bread.
from bread.
That's insane. It's fantastic. It's also insane that we know bread is salty, but to have that much of an impact is gigantic. That's awesome. Very cool. Okay, so diving into food labels with when you see the product and you grab whatever it might be, a bag of chips, a protein bar, anything that has a label on it. I think so many of us just assume that we can trust it 100%, that it's on this package. And so it must have been tested, and someone on the back end somewhere has validated it and signed off on it that these numbers are right. The reality, though, that you and I both know is that the burden of accuracy is really on the food manufacturer, and that there's not strict defined ways that they have to have this tested. So our team at Oshner Fitness Center, our team of dietitians, will work with companies, especially companies that don't have a budget to have their product lab tested. They send us batch recipe. We can use a recipe analysis software, do the analysis, and come back with them and say, okay, here's a label. And your team does this as well. And it's a very financially efficient way for someone to do it because it's basically math. But that flies, like that can go onto a label. And fortunately, you or me know what we're doing. And so that information is going to be accurate. But if a company is just taking it upon themselves, they might be able to, they could be creating their own label that might not be so accurate.
Yes, and really it's understanding the nuances. And so we're really fortunate that all of these recipe analysis softwares, the vast majority of them are pulling from the USDA nutritional database. And that has a nutritional analysis that was done on these products. And the USDA basically spent a fortune testing carrots. And so they would, if they were going to put in carrots, they would test carrots in a can with salt, carrots in a can without salt. And they were run about 10 to 15 tests per example. And they basically built this huge database. The problem is in the food industry, not a lot of products are like that. So a lot of food manufacturers are having to modify the formulations or the nutritional a little bit. And that's where we see some of these companies, as you were saying, if they try to do it by hand without understanding this variation concept, that it can lead them into having an incorrect nutritional panel.
And not that they're breaking out a pencil and lined paper, but it could be. They can put that information on there, have a label generated, put it on their product, and it may or may not be accurate. So I think where we see that most often, I think, is really smaller brands, newer brands and smaller companies. I think a lot of mom and pops, because they don't have the money to pay for lab testing, and they don't know who to reach out to for that accurate recipe analysis. And so they're kind of doing their best. And you say, and I agree, most of these aren't trying to manipulate us or mislead us. They're doing their best, but they just don't know.
Yeah, I think they either don't know or the formula has changed and they didn't update the nutritional. The other way that they can be thinking they're accurate and they're not is using some of the online free nutritional
Oh
analysis
my
softwares.
gosh. Yeah.
we've done just kind of looking at it in classes, and we found really large variations between the different free online ones. So it is in this situation, it is very much you kind of get what you pay for.
And on those, I think it's so if you're at home and you've okay, I've got my favorite recipe and I'm plugging in I found an online site and I'm plugging in to see what the nutrition facts are for this recipe. There's some sites that we call it user generated data. And so that means like anyone who's listening to this podcast could create an item on there. And you might say, here's this brand of Greek yogurt, and you're putting in all the nutrition facts as you think you got it accurate on the label, but it's not. Maybe something was wrong for the weight you put it in for. Now that lives on that site, other users pull up that yogurt and they're using that incorrect data. And so it perpetuates that. So using a USDA linked database, and the USDA has one. It's not very pretty, but it's functional and it's accurate. But there's so knowing kind of first and foremost, are you using that accurate information? But am I right that the FDA doesn't require that it's even computer analyzed? Someone literally could do pen and paper if they wanted.
So the FDA does not require. What they state is that you have to have a nutritional analysis performed on the product, and it has to be accurate within a certain percent. And so when the FDA goes to audit a company, they're going to look at the panel and said, how was it done? And if they have questions, then they'll pull a sample and they'll send it to their labs for analysis. So as companies are starting, the FDA is generally much more in tune with making sure that their nutritional panel information is accurate before they are before they really move a bunch of product and really go into the marketplace. And so what they're doing is they're really trying to have that extra level of safeguard, making sure someone didn't just steal a nutritional label off another product and slap it on their label.
And so the larger a company is, the more likely they're going to have that scrutiny and those errors would be caught. But then sometimes the smaller companies may not have it. And so if you're looking at something and you say, this doesn't seem right, and a lot of times you can even tell, I'll look at a label and it's got the serving size seems off or something doesn't seem quite right. And when I start looking closer at the label, I see typos, I see other things in there, and you realize this was, the product may be delicious and it may be nutritious, but they're working on with limited resources there. So doing the analysis, computer generated analysis is one way, and that works for things that are pretty straightforward. So you have a batch of cookies, for example, and it makes this many cookies, or you have chicken salad with your, whatever the ingredients are, and it makes this many servings. But when something is deep fried, then you can't do that because you really don't know exactly the oil absorption or the sodium
Correct.
transfer. So those things have to be lab analyzed in order to truly be accurate, or things that are marinated and to know exactly how much soaks in. Or so tell us about the lab analysis and what that involves. So if someone is getting pizza, or let's say one thing that I had done was there's these blackened tenders at Popeyes, and the nutrition facts on them are they look about as lean as grilled skinless chicken breast, but they're deep fried, but they're not breaded. So I thought there's no way these are seasoned, deep fried, and then the total fat and saturated fat line up almost identical to just grilled skinless chicken breast. So I brought them to the lab, had them tested, and sure enough, that the stats were right. But I didn't just bring one 3-piece order of tenders. I had to bring a lot.
Correct.
So tell us about that. So when someone is having something lab tested, what does that look like? How much do you have to have in order for it to be accurate? The different lots that ideally someone gets it from, all of that.
Sure. So what we try to do is, for example, if a pizza company came to us and said, we'd like to analyze our pizzas, we can do the computer generated and get an idea. But really, when we go into the lab, we're going to get the most accurate information. And that's because there's going to be different, slight, minute changes with agricultural products, being dairy, meats, grains, things like that. And so because there's those variations, we can't just test one slice or one pizza. So the fun part on our end is that we normally have to get anywhere from 3 to 7 pizzas. And then we will take a couple slices from each pizza and puree them, which is a very interesting sight. And then...
and this is anything.
This is anything.
How do you puree it if it's very hard or dry?
So we actually have to know what our dilution is. So we'll put some water in there and we know we're going to put in 10% water, and then we can back calculate that as we do our analysis and our measurements. So what we're seeing is we're taking random samples of various pizzas or various samples of their food products. We're homogenizing them to get them to a very even mixture, and then we're pulling small samples out of that.
And so, for example, if I was questioning the Popeyes chicken tenders, to keep it as accurate as possible, it wouldn't just be going to the Popeyes by my house. It would be ideal to go to multiple different locations. And so that we're getting, not just one, because there might be some sort of a outlier there. And so getting kind of a representative sample from different lots. So then you puree it. What happens next in your lab? And I have to say, like, I worked in a food lab in college, a food analysis lab, and it was interesting. It was fun, and it was really cool to see. And it kind of gave me that insight of, wow, like there's so much more than just even nutrition, but the development process is just fascinating to me.
Yeah, it's the hidden science that most people don't think
Mhm.
of. So we see a lot of chemists going into food analysis because it's the direct application of what they've learned in their schooling and education, but in an applied format. And so we really like to tell people that food science and food analysis is a very strong STEM field. So if you're interested in science, there's plenty of opportunities to be able to play with your food, as we like to kind of joke around. But yeah, so you can't pull from just one. And so we will test a couple pizzas, we'll puree them with water, then we dry the samples down in a controlled oven. It's set at 70 C. And once we put the sample in, we crank it up to 90. And then as the temperature of the product starts to go closer to 70, it starts going back down to 70. We also have to make sure the container that the product is in is free, so that way there's a lot of surface area. That way we don't get case hardening. So there's a lot of small details that go into it. But we dry the product down, and then once we have that dried product, we have to keep it dry so we don't get misleading results. And then from there, we can take samples of that dried product and we can run it through a Soxhlet fat extractor and look at how much fat we can draw out of that product. We can run it through a nitric protein digester. And then we can also just take samples of the dried product and look at it for sodium, for potassium, all the minerals. And then we can run that with a known dilution to do the vitamin analysis.
And so if a company is paying for this retail through a standard lab nationally who does this, to get the full spectrum of nutrient analysis, it's over $700 per item.
Minimum.
And so that's a big limiting factor for companies. And so many, like we were saying, a lot of these smaller companies, they simply don't have it. They don't have a resource of someone who can do proper labeling for them. So that's why there's a lot of error. But you guys with Holy Cross, y'all do it for a discounted, or I guess a subsidized rate.
Right. So we're able to do it at a lower rate because we're getting our students involved and we
That's
bring.
where the subsidy is.
Right. So our students' tuition subsidizes it, but they're learning it in the classroom in a real world setting. So they're seeing how the faculty are doing it, then they're getting the chance to do the same experimentation. And then that way, all the students are getting results. And at the same time, we're getting our results in either triplicate or quad. So we can really we're not just taking one data point, we're making sure that across the board, we're getting the same number or close to that same number kind of consistently to make sure that number is accurate and the results are accurate.
And then we can do a plug for you guys because y'all can do this for anyone across the country.
Yes. So we've worked with startup companies all the way to billion-dollar international companies. And is basically we come to them, we treat everyone the same. If you can provide us the information, we're happy to work with these companies directly.
And so even if they're not local, they can send frozen product to you.
Correct.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And when we say significantly less, it's about half.
Right. So our current price for the wet chemistry analysis is $375. So we're a little bit over half, but in the grand scheme of things, For a company has to do multiple testing, that's a tremendous savings to them.
And so with our Eat Fit partners too, there's some items that we can't, Eat Fit's a nonprofit. We don't charge the restaurants. We work with them to put healthy options on menus. And so we do the recipe analysis for those items that we think would fit Eat Fit at no cost to them. However, every once in a while, there's something that we just can't figure it out by the calculations, and we do have to have it lab tested. And so we always send it to you guys for that reason. So let's talk about the deviation that can happen on a label. So there's a 20% over under that's allowable on a label legally. So if you're looking at something that says 200 calories, it really could have 240, and it's still completely in line and legal by saying it's 200.
So they understand that there's natural variations in food products and food processing. So they do give a deviance. What they want to see though is while this product may have 240, that in general, if they pulled random samples, they're going to average out to the 200.
But am I right that like a frozen dinner could say 300, but it really has 370? But is anybody really going and checking that except their competitors?
Right. So I'm going to say depending on the size of the company, competitors are going to be checking. And what they're looking at is they want to make sure you're compliant. Was a lawsuit filed by Monster Energy Monster Energy Drinks against one of their competitors, and their competitor actually had to change their packaging and labeling because they didn't match up. And so your competitors are going to look at it, but also there's the Consumer Safety Bureau. There's a bunch of these organizations that also look out for the consumer. And what they're doing is they're pulling random products, they're doing testing. And so they're wanting to make sure that, yes, a company is claiming as accurate as possible. But could a 300 calorie frozen dinner have 370? Sure. Especially as we stated earlier, if someone has changed the formula or an employee feels like, oh, it needs more cheese than it's getting, and they run it through a double pass of cheese. All of a sudden, the employee doesn't see how that's a big difference. But someone on a diet, obviously, now you're starting to compound these.
I also notice sometimes there's products that the nutrition stats are fantastic. The product tastes really good. And you're like, wow, this is incredible. This is so almost too good to be true. And then that product changes, or it's no longer on shelves, or the label's different, So sometimes that somewhere along the line, there was an error there that either the label catches up with what that product actually is, or now the label stays the same, but that product doesn't taste nearly as good. There's been something caught.
Yeah. And so companies are always trying to eliminate or reduce the number of errors in their processing. And so you're going to see changes like that on a regular basis. You'll also see that companies change their serving size, or they'll change the packaging size. And what they're trying to do is trying to make sure they're getting as close to that nutritional label, or they're modifying the nutritional label to be as close to their food product as possible. So you are going to see changes over time. And as more technology enters the food manufacturing and food testing world, it gives us so much more knowledge. And we're looking at faster protein analyses now. What used to take 6 hours can happen in 30 minutes. Now we're seeing some protein analysis can happen under 5 minutes, depending on what the protein is. So it really gives us a whole lot of flexibility in the food testing world to really make sure these nutritional panels are as accurate as possible.
You're so much less cynical than I am about it. I'm like, these food makers, and they put this on the label, and but I do think that sometimes they're trying to fake us out. I don't think you think that as much. I think that you think that they have better intentions than what I might think they do.
So I'm going to assume that food manufacturers really do want to do the right thing. And I'm going on my 20 plus years in food and beverage manufacturing.
That's a little bit skewed though, because you're working with the people who are coming to you for help.
That is true too.
So, I definitely, I know, I do think that many of them do. I think that some would say, well, hey, if we can get by with this claim, or we can get by with these numbers, let's do,
Yeah, and I'm sure there are.
Yeah.
Again, I still want to assume the best.
No, I agree. I can learn from you. I need to be less cynical on it.
Well, as a dietitian, I think it's probably more of your focus. Whereas mine, it's making sure that the food is safe and reproducible.
And the
And
people who come to you are truly wanting that help, and you're able to give that guidance.
correct, yeah.
Yeah. So, you're able to test for things like all the nutrients that we said, the macronutrients, carbs, protein, fat, the micronutrients of things like iron, sodium, et cetera. Also, things like alcohol
Mhm.
content. And there's what about things like gluten? You can
Mhm.
test for traces of this. So, really, this is a fascinating thing because anybody who says, "Hey, I have a question about this product. I'm not quite sure that this lives up to it." And even the average consumer could reach out and say, "Hey, could we have this tested?" If they had the $375 for
Correct,
that.
yeah.
Yeah. So, I think it definitely empowers all of us to know that that service is out there. And while it is pricey, it's not completely out of the realm if it's something that's important enough to us. And I think it's interesting that a lot of the cross checks are from the company's competitors. Makes sense.
Yeah, and there are a few times when the nutritional label doesn't match the product and within reason. So there's products like Olestra that came out a couple decades ago, I'm thinking, probably 2 decades ago.
Explain what Elistra is for
And
anyone who's
so
not familiar.
sure. So Olestra is a fat substitute, and it looks like a fat, tastes like a fat,
Has the
but
mouthfeel
has the
of a fat.
mouthfeel, but your body can't process it as a fat. And so because of that, too much Olestra can cause, and the warning label on it is can cause anal leakage.
I
Um,
knew I was like, I was smiling as you started with the Elistra conversation. I was like, what was that warning on
yeah.
there? Yes.
So excess Olestra can cause diarrhea and things like that and upset stomachs, but
Which would be a better way. Why didn't they just say that?
you can thank the government.
Right.
Um, but yeah, so the potato chips that fried in Olestra look like potato chips, taste like potato chips, but your body can't absorb that fat. So the nutritional panel there looks really, uh,
Wonky, like
really
something's not
wonky,
right.
right? And if you go to test it, Olestra is going to come out in the same fat analysis. So if you don't know that Olestra is in the product, then your results could be skewed. So it's really important to kind of see what the products the company are making.
We had that. There was a pizza years back, and it was a very high fiber, low carb pizza. And the calories were really shockingly low. The carbs were shockingly low. And in doing a lab test of it, it looks like on first pass that it was not accurate, but they were using a lot of isolated fibers as part of that carbohydrate contributor. And so these isolated fibers, like inulin, showed up as carbohydrate in the analysis, but they have really essentially no calories, whereas carbohydrate technically has 4 calories per gram. So knowing then, okay, well, the makeup of that was the inulin and that was replacing or displacing a lot of the flour in there, then it made sense. But when we first got the numbers back, the carb count was 3, 4, or more times than what was stated on the label. So I was like, this is why the numbers are off. But then again, on closer conversation with the company, and that was a case where, to your point, the owner of the company was completely sincere, completely out there to do the right thing, had created this product and was very proud of it, and worked very closely with me. And we dug deeper and brought a lab in, but it had to be a lab that had the special ability to detect those types of isolated fibers, where not all of them at that time did. The same would be for sugar alcohols. Um,
Correct. And sugar alcohols, but also the product that we're seeing a lot more going into food manufacturing, is a product called allulose.
so talk about both of those. Sugar alcohols would be erythritol, which is what's in Swerve,
Correct.
produced here in New Orleans. It's also what's in Truvia. And so erythritol has typically carbs again have 4 calories per gram, but erythritol has essentially zero or point oh 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 oh. So that's but if you don't know it and you're doing it's still classed as a carbohydrate. So if you're looking at that on a label, you would add up your calories from your carbs and it doesn't match what the calories are on the label.
Right. And so you'll have products like your sugar alcohols, allulose, that sugar alcohols, Swerve, for example, very low calorie. Um, Allulose has zero point 0.4 calories per gram.
What types of foods is allulose in?
So we're seeing it. It's relatively new to the market, but what we're seeing is we're seeing it a lot in dairy products. We're going to probably see it in snack bars probably first. these snack foods where there's typically a higher sugar content.
I've only seen it so far in one protein bar. I think it was in a Quest protein bar. Is it out yet on the market in dairy yet?
It in some small markets it is. You can also buy pure allulose on Amazon. So if you wanted to use it, the great thing about allulose is it basically has the same structural properties of sugar. So how you would use sugar, you can use allulose pretty interchangeably. The only difference is that allulose is about 70% as sweet as sucrose. So you normally have to put a little bit more in there.
And so just like any of the sugar alcohols, you're you would register carbohydrate on the label, but when you look at your carbs plus your protein plus your fat to equal X amount of calories, that's off because those carbs don't contain as many calories as regular carbs
Right,
do.
by let's say a factor of 10 minimum.
So a lot of times, I think if you're looking at things like ice creams, like a Halo Top that would have erythritol in it, or a
Mhm.
lot of protein bars that have a sugar alcohol in it, and you would say, okay, let me add up my calories from protein, from carb, from fat, accounting for the 4 calories per gram for protein, 4 per gram for carb, and 9 for fat. It's like wacky math and it doesn't add up at all. But then you look and see, okay, well, they've accounted for that because of the sugar alcohols. But again, you guys have to know that going in as you're doing the analysis.
Right. And that's why when we do any analysis, we always ask for the product as well as the ingredient deck and the recipe. That way we can really see what's going into the product and that if there's anything unique that we have to account for.
Okay, no, I think that's fascinating. What other things to talk about on a label that can be surprising to people that they may not know is on the back end?
Serving size, yeah, and then you've got the new label format coming out.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So, about serving sizes, that's something that really there's a decent bit of variation on that. 16-ounce bottles of something may say 2 servings if they're being, and their numbers are going to look a lot better. It may say 1 serving if it's just 16 ounces. There are standard serving sizes, but there is some interpretation or some looseness as to what the companies can choose to put on there.
Right. So the FDA has standard serving sizes, and basically, and we joke about this in my food law class, is that the serving size is designed for a child 4 and older. So, assuming that a 4-year old will eat as much as a 50-year-old man is very just wacky, but it's in their term, that's the best way to do it. And so they've created serving sizes and these serving sizes will vary. So you might have two beverages that are both 16 ounces. One can have them split as 8 ounces. One might not be able to because it's considered a single serve package. So it's really product specific. And then within that serving size, the company has a little bit of wiggle room where if a serving is, say, 50 grams, but their serving is 45 grams, then they can have that as one serving. And so it's important to also look at not just what the serving size is, but look what the gram weight is on a nutritional panel when you're comparing two products or the milliliter to make sure you're comparing apples to apples per se.
And that's the weight is huge. When you look at a serving of rice or pasta, it's half of a cup, and that's basic cooked, and that's basically what fits into a cupcake wrapper. And that's such a minuscule amount for most people, but that's what a standard serving is. So when you're looking at that box of mac and cheese and you're looking at a serving, it might not look that bad, but how many little cupcake wrappers filled are you having of that pasta? Um,
I
I
was
don't,
going to say, with the rice as a great example, we recently worked with a company and they created a seasoned rice mix. Well, now going from, they had originally calculated their serving size based on half a cup. But because it's now a seasoned rice mix, it changes serving size categories, and the serving size actually goes to a third of a cup. So what they were thinking was
isn't that
higher
really
just by
ridiculous?
changing those little nuances.
So if I'm gonna say, oh, I'm having rice, it's a half a cup as a serving. But if I'm gonna have seasoned rice, a third of a cup.
Because it's considered a side. Yep.
However, that's just what goes on the label, which helps their numbers look better, but the consumer's still going to eat just as much.
Correct.
Right. Going back to the weight. So not that I'm not a big fan of people measuring or weighing food just as a standard course of living. I think that it can be beneficial to see what a serving is and then put the scale away, live your life, don't live by that. However, cereal, boxed cereal, and you look at what the serving sizes are on there, it's insane. And you may think, oh, okay, a cup or three-quarters of a cup. But when you look at the gram weight, like you said, and you pull out your kitchen scale and you see how much is that, it's not much on most of these. Like you might be eating in your cereal bowl easily 5 servings of cereal.
Yeah, and so that's kind of important to understand the history of how these products came about. So, breakfast cereal was actually created as a way to be part of a minimalist lifestyle. And so, the whole idea of a small serving of cereal was basically you were eating it strictly for the nutrition, not for the pleasure of eating. And so,
And
that
like Jerry
serving,
Seinfeld, who's like eating bowls and bowls of cereal, right?
correct. And so now that serving size historically has just stayed the same because that was basically the serving size grandfathered in. But now in a whole completely different society, we're not eating it for the uh, negative aspects of it and trying to live very pious by eating it, but we're eating it because we enjoy it. And so I know that if I took a serving size of something like Lucky Charms, it's going to be at least 5 times the serving size because I want as many of the marshmallows as possible.
Right? Who doesn't, right? Um, we didn't really have Lucky Charms in our house as a kid, but friends did. And if we were over there, I'd think by the time I left, they just had cereal. There was no marshmallows left. Um, I think that's an interesting story about this the invention or origination of cereal. Share it with us because I'm familiar, but share the story.
Sure. So Kellogg was running a religious retreat center.
He was a physician, right?
He was a physician and was running a religious retreat center.
And this is in the 1800s, 1900s?
Sure.
Okay. A long time ago.
You're right. My history's not the best. I know stories, not dates. But so he was trying to bake crackers and ended up leaving the dough in the oven too long and it became super thin and crispy. And when he went to pick it up, it fell apart. And so somebody said, oh, just put it in a bowl. And then, similar to like oatmeal, they would pour a liquid over it. In this case, they poured cold milk. And so, because it was basically bland and tasteless, that he thought that cornflakes could be used to help prevent masturbatory tendencies.
And also, he was a big fan of regularity.
Yes,
And
the
so
fiber aspect, right?
his first reason for it didn't make it onto the box.
That would be very interesting marketing nowadays. I don't think that's an approved FDA label claim.
Moms, get your kids to have cereal. Yeah.
Yeah,
And that's how it started.
and that's how it started.
And that is the foundation of the typical American breakfast. But it's a creation. It is a created product. It's not something that for centuries Americans have had as a breakfast. And when we go to other countries, there's, higher protein. They're incorporating more vegetables. They're incorporating entirely. There's not foods like cereal that's for breakfast. They only have it for the Americans.
Yeah, so you see traditional diets around, and whether it's a traditional American diet, a traditional South American diet, I'm gonna group those all together, even though they're completely different. Traditional European diet, depending on where in Europe you are, they're all have very substantial differences. And so if you look at here in South Louisiana, we kind of think of what is a traditional breakfast. Well, it really depended on what ethnicity you were and what social class you were. So the whole idea between a hoe cake was scraps of cornmeal that were left in the mill that the slaves could sweep out. So normally they were larger pieces of cornmeal and they were mixed with water and they were cooked over an open fire on their garden hoe. And so to them, that was a very dense, filling, and nutritious meal that would get them from breakfast through the end of the day. Where now we're just trying to get us from breakfast to lunch.
Or breakfast to that mid-morning snack, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, so fascinating story about breakfast cereal. Pass that one along. So he was apparently like an avid advocate of regularity also though, really. And this was something which is interesting because cornflakes aren't even that good for us.
Well, I mean, nowadays, most of the products have been so refined that we're seeing a very different product than what's originally
True.
created.
True. Okay. So not to judge.
Not to judge. Cornflakes as a whole, I mean, you've got your corn, your water, you bake them together. But if you look at something like bran flakes, then you can start seeing how there's some
It could
better
be
nutritious.
prescribed
Right.
for all of these benefits. Yeah. All right. So talking about the new nutrition facts label, this is something that's been talked about for, it feels like a decade that we've been talking about what's going to be on the new label, but it's finally changing officially where it'll be mandatory for all products to have the new nutrition facts label in January of 2020.
Correct.
Some you see it on there now, but it's voluntary.
Correct. So when the new law was passed and I say new loosely because it was passed in 2014, and we're 6 years, we're getting close to it, but they wanted to give companies enough time to make the change. So it was originally designed for 2017, 2018, but then companies challenged it and they said, okay, the government basically said, we're going to give you more time. And so that's how it got delayed.
And you don't think it's going to be delayed again or pushed back again?
I think at this point we would have heard it being challenged. We're
Sure.
so close that I think companies have basically just accepted the fact that there's going to be changes made.
And some of the biggest changes in it, as you and I were talking before, I thought, oh, it doesn't have cholesterol. And you corrected me, it does. When we look at what matters on the label, cholesterol really doesn't matter. And so I wish that they would have removed that from the new label because cholesterol that's in food really has minimal, if any, impact on our cholesterol levels. And I find it very confusing to people. So if you're looking at a label, you can, for the most part, completely disregard cholesterol.
Unless you're pretty much only eating a high cholesterol diet, correct?
Right, right. And so what are the main changes that we're looking at that you're happy about on the new label?
Sure. I think the really big factor is that they've really highlighted serving size and total calorie. It's really jumping out. And then I think one thing where, and on more of the subtle side, they've pulled out vitamin C, which makes complete sense because there's very few cases of scurvy nowadays.
Right.
So
Vitamin C deficiency,
yeah,
right.
so vitamin C deficiency is not really a problem anymore. But what we are seeing in clinical settings in hospitals, nursing homes, general blood work is potassium deficiency. So the government said, okay, we're going to take vitamin C off and we're going to put potassium on there because that's the current issue. And so at least it shows that the government is using modern science and modern health situations to really highlight what's best to inform the consumer on.
And what we should even be aware of in our diets: vitamin D, calcium, iron, and potassium. Pulling vitamin C out of that conversation. Yeah.
Right.
And potassium, there's a lot of benefits, of course, but a high potassium diet linked to lower blood pressure. So
right. It balances sodium in the body.
Someone's eye goes straight to sodium on the label. We've been trained so much. Okay, what's the sodium content in this? Especially if you've been diagnosed with high blood pressure and you need to, your eye goes straight to that. Well, now looking at the potassium and, okay, well, maybe something does have a little bit more sodium than I would love. However, if it's also really high in potassium, that makes it a little better.
Correct.
Cholesterol, as we said, I wish wasn't on there. The thing that I'm most excited about on the new label is including added sugars.
So added sugars, the whole idea behind that is making sure that consumers know the difference between candy and apple juice. While apple juice may be high in sugar, the sugars are naturally present in the apple versus a candy bar where all the sugars are coming from added sugars. So I think that's really a valid distinction. But there are, again, like we talked about allulose. Allulose is not considered an added sugar, even though it's a sugar by chemical analysis.
So whenever we're looking at added sugar, that would also, the example I give is like a flavored yogurt, because yogurt has natural milk sugars in it. And if you look at a plain yogurt, you'll see 6 grams of sugar, but under this new label, it would say 0 added sugar. But if you're looking at a flavored yogurt and it has 12 or 14, sometimes depending on the size of the container, well, how much of that's from the yogurt itself and how much of it is added sugar? Or maybe if there's fruit in there, that also can kind of further complicate it. So seeing the added sugar helps to give us a little more clarity, except that there are some things that people can use to get around it, like fruit juices, like that adding apple juice would still be essentially just adding sugar. It's not, you know,
Right. So the rule states that it's not added sugar as long as you bring the apple juice up to or beyond 100% dilution. So if you have 150% concentrate, then you have added sugars. But if you're adding apple juice as a liquid medium, 100% apple juice, then you can hide that and it's not necessarily an added sugar.
so it's still a little bit sneaky there, but still a lot more disclosure for being able to see the added sugars on the label.
Correct.
And anything else on the label, so bolder as far as our number of servings container per container, bolder serving sizes, bolder calories, kind of calling these things out. We still have our saturated fat on there. We still have our sodium, our fiber. Now we've got added sugars.
Yeah, and I think what really you're going to see is for a while it's been on some of the major restaurant chains, and I think some of the smaller chains are adopting that and putting it on their menu because customers are asking. So I think that in addition to the retail label, you're going to start seeing restaurants being much more proactive in that aspect. And so I think that's good because it has been shown that consumers will modify an order based on a seeing a calorie count.
And we've have a few larger chains that we've done the analysis for. And what's fantastic is when they see the numbers and how horrific they are, they then say, okay, what can we start doing? What are some big sweeping changes we can do to improve, especially the sodium in restaurants and the calories to make it? Because if they're going to put those numbers out there, yeah, they may not be great, but at least they don't have to be as shocking to the consumer. And so the restaurants are aware of that. And so it starts to not only change the consumer behavior when we see what those numbers are, but also the industry behavior because they don't want those numbers to be so bad.
Right. So you're seeing more products being falling into the healthy developed category. So they're developing healthier options, even though it might still be in their snack portfolio. It's going to be a healthier snack option.
And so, what are, I think that for labels, we may have covered it. I know there's always stuff that I'm got my eye roll about or things like that. What are some other fun projects or just some little side notes? You were telling me this morning you did a TV interview on microwave foods and what should not be microwave. Completely not related to labels, but I think this is interesting.
Sure. Yeah, so we had the opportunity to go on Fox News and talk about microwave foods and really highlighting the safety aspect. And what we want to do is we want to highlight not just the safety in terms of the food safety, but also safety of the consumer. One of the big issues with microwaving is that unlike other forms of heat, it actually kind of can penetrate. So if you understand basic energy, it acts as a wave, and so it moves through the molecules. And microwave works by agitating the water molecules. The water molecules get warm, they start moving, and they heat up next the products next to it. So the concern with that is if you're microwaving something like chicken, which has a hollow bone, if you forget it in the microwave or you set it for too long, you can actually cause that bone to explode and shatter. And it's can develop enough pressure that it can actually shatter the microwave glass door and send shards flying at you. So it is a
Is
legitimate
this
concern.
common?
We hope not. A lot of microwaves have basically they're reinforced glass, and for that reason, also, what you see is one of the things we found really crazy is that there's tons of recipes recently on microwaving eggs in the shell to create a boiled or slash microwave boiled egg, but all of them were like had cautionary terms like make sure you don't overcook it. Well, think about it, you're building all this pressure up in the shell, there's a huge risk of explosion there too. So there's factors like that. Then we also talked about when you're microwaving a sandwich. Let's say you pack your sandwich, you throw a toothpick in it to hold it together, or it's a leftover.
I would think it's wood. It could go in the microwave.
Right. And it can, except for the fact that wood on toothpicks tapers to a point and it can potentially create a spark at that point and start a fire in the microwave. So, and then a lot of the paper bags that we put food in, they're designed for storage. They're not designed for heating. So they may leak some vapor off and things like that, especially in the printing system.
Can the ink catch fire in the microwave?
So in some bags we've actually looked at, we tried microwaving, we went to a couple places and got takeout bags, and
What kind of like hazmat gear are y'all wearing as you're like microwaving all this stuff that could potentially explode?
so I'm having students put these things in the
Right.
microwave and stand there and watch, but
In
no.
their fire gear.
Right. No. So we have on protective lab gear.
Mhm.
We have face shields. We have heat-proof gloves. So we're really trying to do it the accurate way.
Don't do this at home, children.
Yes, do
No.
not do
Right.
this at home. But we were putting a couple bags in the microwave, and we saw that certain bags from different places had a tendency to the ink to dissipate or to leach during heating. We found that of the fast food restaurants, none of them had ink that was changeable. So companies that understand that you might buy food, you might reheat it, they're a little bit more knowledgeable. But also, we talked about things like microwaving styrofoam, and so you see the styrofoam melt in the bottom of the tray that your food's in contact with. Those fumes and chemicals are
Don't
going somewhere.
just stop. Right. Don't do it.
Yeah. So styrofoam, no, no. Another thing we pointed out is like with tea, or like if you're making tea or you're heating up some soup in the microwave, it's important to have something there to break the surface tension because what happens is the water gets superheated. And with no agitation, then when you go to pull it out of the microwave, it can explode on you. So we
Even just
recommend
like heating water or tea.
in a coffee mug. Yeah.
Wow.
So we recommend a wooden.
Would it just almost like splash out would be what you would
It
perceive?
basically erupts. It looks like a volcanic explosion. Like all of a sudden, it's still. You touch it, you put any agitation to it, and there's that momentum for
Wow.
change.
Who okay, so we knew that microwaves weren't fantastic, but who knew there was such danger
Yeah.
lurking?
And so, but you can solve that by putting
Right.
in a wooden skewer or a wooden chopstick, and then you can eliminate that concern.
Just not a super pointy chopstick.
Well, if you put the point
It's
side down, then it's submerged in water and it's not going to catch fire.
so this is stressful.
Yes.
Use your oven, use your stovetop. So microwave popcorn is one that people make, and I've had clients for years tell me that they, just to save money, they'll take kernels, and an easy trick is taking kernels, put it in your paper bag, roll it up. And so I would pass that along if someone liked microwave popcorn. This is easy. You don't have to buy it. You can do it this way in just a brown paper bag. But I'd always be careful. Be sure you're not using something that has ink on it. But then I had one lady put a rubber band on it. She was afraid her bag was going to come flying open, and then the rubber band.
Melted and caught fire.
Yeah. So then I had to start saying, all right, if you do it, no ink, no rubber band, roll the bag, and you're not going to have popcorn flying everywhere. It kind of gently unfolds, but it doesn't completely open, and your popcorn's everywhere.
Yeah, and the bags for microwave popcorn, the packaging material is different. So the bags for microwave popcorn are actually designed to have what's called susceptors in them.
These are just brown lunch bags that people
Right.
would do like it. Yeah. And then the lining though of the bags you're talking about used to have a coating that was a carcinogen, but they've changed that. And so I think it's kind of one of those old holdovers that people say, oh, you shouldn't have microwave popcorn because the lining of the bag is going to kill you, cause cancer. You can't find any of the
No,
coatings on
all
the
of
bags
that's
now.
been removed.
Yeah.
And the
But the
popcorn
myth still
industry,
stays. People still talk as if it's there.
yeah, it's really hard to break people of their old wives' tales, of their kind of urban legends, and they're all rooted in something. But even if the industry has changed, they're still saying that.
Hmm.
So the popcorn industry is super on point about trying to make products healthier, trying to make products tastier, trying to make sure that they are making products that are really geared towards the consumer. And so they're trying to do everything they can in the best way. And in that, it's changing the packaging. And what they found through changing the packaging is you actually created a better popcorn.
And there's times 'cause I'll be guilty of that. I'll kind of say, well, this product has XYZ that I don't love about it. And then, but it's very important for us to be open and also realize that when these companies are making strides to improve the product, we got to give them props for that, and they're either improving the product or their packaging or whatever it is. We have to kind of let those old things go and then say, okay, let's revisit what's the new product and then reevaluate it and come up with these new opinions because so many of our opinions are harbored in the past.
Yeah, I think, if let's use McDonald's as an example. Everyone says, oh, don't feed your kids McDonald's, it's so bad for you. Well, when McDonald's decided they were going to put apples in the Happy Meals, they actually had to plant orchards to be able to have enough apples to supply the whole US. So McDonald's is now the number one server of apples in the country. And McDonald's made a decision about 3 to 5 years ago where all their buns are white whole wheat. They didn't tell anybody, they just did it on their own. So the companies are out there trying to do the right thing. But again, it comes down to consumers shopping with their dollars and choosing with their dollars what are they going to support.
I wonder if people notice the difference in the buns.
No, so McDonald's went through 5 years of sensory development to make sure the buns had no difference.
And like you said, they didn't tell anyone, probably because they were afraid people would say, "Oh, I'm not going to have that. I'm not going to like that," with this preconceived idea.
Right.
Yeah. So I think lesson learned here, it's important to educate ourselves on products. It's important to realize when something is flawed, but then also realizing that when a brand or a company is making these changes, for us to kind of let go of that, and I have it too, but let go of that past opinion we have and give that a fresh glance. And we may still not love it, or we may not like or agree with other things about that company, but realizing that there's a lot of progress being made. So anything else that you would say is kind of one of those interesting tidbits to share with our listeners?
I think it comes down to, and with you being a dietitian, you don't want to eliminate anything from the diet. Because once you start trying to eliminate something, unless it's a true poison or carcinogen, then you're going to have what we kind of talk about like food relapses. And so when people are going on new diets, the reasons diets fail is they feel like they have to exclude. I think it comes down to just being really mindful about what you're eating, what you're serving yourself, your friends, your family. And I think if you look at it from that standpoint, is it wrong to have a candy bar? No. Should you have a candy bar every hour? Probably not. And that, again, two extremes, but there's been tons of research out there that shows there's a difference between calories. So a calorie in an apple and a calorie in a candy bar may not be the same thing. A calorie in an apple and a calorie in a soda are very different things. But the calorie content, it still comes down to what goes in and how much you're burning. And so it really comes down to those two main things.
And I think to your point, as soon as we're told something is off limits, that's the only thing that we can think about,
Right.
And I think educating ourselves about the facts about these foods, also paying attention to how these foods and drinks leave us feeling, because no one's going to be like, "Oh my God, I feel the best when I drink nothing but Coca-Cola all day long."
Right.
No one. Most people would acknowledge that when they have a lot of sugar, they don't feel so great, or, "Oh man, when I cleared out the sugar, I felt so much better." But paying attention to how these things feel. And I like to have that be the motivator of, do I have this or do I not have it? Of how's it going to leave me feeling in 2 hours versus the air quotes of I should or I shouldn't have this. And I completely agree. There's no food that I'm not going to have if I want to have it, but I'll choose how often I'm going to have those things based on how it leaves me feeling.
Yeah, and it's knowing those foods as a dietitian, you have a general idea of how to choose those foods. As a general consumer, that's kind of the whole point of the new nutritional label, to really give you a better idea of, is this a quality food from a diet standpoint? Is this an indulgence? Is this something that I'm going to have daily, weekly? And that's really what the nutritional label all comes down to with the new format is, here's the serving size, here's the calorie content. How does that fit your diet, your lifestyle?
And there's so much more that we could throw in on all these products about education, but only so much fits on that label.
Correct.
So our work is never going to end. It's always
I
going
hope
to
not.
Right. I know. There's so much to do. All right. Well, thank you so much, Darryl. I appreciate it. And we'll put the link to the Food Science Lab and your information, so someone would know how to reach you if they've got something they want to run by you.
Sounds great.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So we're so grateful to Dr. Holliday for joining us today. I always learn from you, I always have fun, and I hope that you, our listeners, did as well. You can find the links that we mentioned in the show notes of this episode. I'm Molly Kimball, and you've been listening to Fueled Wellness and Nutrition, the podcast. If you would like more Fueled Wellness and Nutrition, please head over to mollykimball.com, and you can follow me, Molly Kimball RD, on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And if you haven't yet, go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. And join us next week for another dose of Fueled Wellness and Nutrition. Thanks for listening, and stay focused on living your strongest, healthiest life possible.
I'm here on the job site with Dale, who's a framing contractor.
Hey, good morning.
Dale traded up to Geico Commercial Auto Insurance for all his business vehicles. We're here where he needs us most.
Yep, they sure are.
We make it easy for him to save on all his insurance needs, all in one place, with coverage that fits his business and bottom line. Oh, I shouldn't have looked down.
It's all right.
We're so far up here.
Look at me. Take a deep breath.
No, I'm good. So good.
Get a commercial auto insurance quote today at geico.com and see how much you could save. It feels good to Geico.